too shy, and I can tell I'm her kind of guy. She danced close to me like I hope she would. She danced for me like I hope she would. Something tells me I'm into something good. Something tells me I'm into something.
Hi, everyone out there in the world. Now, we've got one of the biggest artists from the 60s, Peter Noone, lead singer of Herman'S Hermits. And I've got to tell you, as far as British songs go and recordings, and you talk about unique songs, and you talk about #1 hits, and you talk about a survivor that's come out of the 60s, and here you are, Peter, in 2023. How are you?
Hello, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Just call me Plastic. I'm going to tell you, it's unbelievable, your career. And I mean, when you look back in 2023, I mean, you did it all. Music, you did movies, you outsold the Beatles. Hermits Mania was bigger than the Beatles because you just appealed to a wider audience and you weren't that serious. And that's what really the secret is. Tell me the secret to your longevity and your success.
Well, it could be that, you know, I was a fan of music. I was a fan, you know, I was listening to the radio this morning, and it was a song, and it was a record that I bought when I was 10. You know, I saw it's 1958. So you think I was a fan of music, and lots of, I had a big record collection, and music was my hobby, and it still is. You know, I still listen to music and, oh, I like that one. Oh, I don't like that one. I'll give it 5, all that stuff, you know. And I think because I loved music so much that it just was a natural hobby. You know, I was lucky I could have have a stamp album and been really good at it. But I'm not a great deliverer of music. I have my own delivery. And the people that I listened to and liked when I was a kid were probably country singers. In America, they were in the country charts. You know, it would be Roy Orbison and Buddy Holly and people that were more, you know, more country than rock and roll. You know, there was a choice. You know, do I get the new Big Bill Broonzy record or do I get the Bobby V record? And that wasn't a choice to me. I would always go and take Good My Baby by Bobby V was a record, and I would take them home. And in my room, we had a 2 up, 2 down house, you know, and I had like a little box which was made into a third room, and we all shared a bathroom. And from my sister's bedroom next door, she had the big posh bedroom, right, all pink. And I had a little room with bunk beds in it in case any friends ever came to stay. And in her room, you would hear, you know, the Bridels and the Diamonds and the you know, like what became the Four Seasons, all those doo-wop songs. We didn't have doo-wop in England because it was always raining. So, and my parents were playing, it was a kind of big band music. And sometimes, like, if anybody in my family died or had a baptism or a christening or a wedding, everybody would get together in a room at my grandmother's house called the parlor. And she lived not far. We all lived within a little, you know, it wasn't a big country, England. It's a little country, you know, and we were very parochial. And we would all gather at my grandmother's house, and she was the choir mistress of the lot. In those days, you were allowed to say choir mistress, but she was the choir mistress. That was her name. And she kind of directed everybody. And my grandfather was the organ player. He had a massive knowledge of hymns and stuff like that. And he could play with his feet, the organ and everything. And my dad had a trombone. And Barry Gibb's dad was in the band, in my dad's band in Manchester, Urmston. And my uncle Lawrence had a trumpet. But my Auntie Mary, when she got there, she could play Fats Waller. You know, my very good friend, the milkman. And we thought that was rock and roll. You know, rock and roll hadn't been. So And we would all get in there because we didn't have a television. Television hadn't been invented, in that part of the world. I think we got one in 1953 for the Queen's coronation, like as big as a mini car, like a Mini Cooper was parked in the room. And people from all over Urmston came to my grandmother's looking through the window to see the coronation. It was always music. There was a radio in the kitchen that played music all day. And in those days, the BBC was a radio station, one radio station, the BBC, and you'd hear the Joel Loss Orchestra and the Billy Cotton Band Show, and you'd hear some classical music and 30-minute everyday pop music, and they would play great records. I didn't know at the time because I didn't know what else was going on, but you would American country records played, and you wouldn't know that they were country because it was all music. All that I just said was all called pop music, and there was no separating the taste. There was nothing else. And sometimes I'd want my dad to turn the radio down in he would say, "A chance." That was his saying. You had to listen to every record until the end, just in case they came up with something good.
Hey, I'm into something good. I mean, how's that? I've got to say, the influence that you had, I've got to explain. With Mickey Most, you had pure pop hits. But what I find about the Herman'S Hermits is you hit success because you were doing these kind of UK hall, back in the past kind of songs, like I'm Henry VIII, sing-along British type of songs. So you hit the formula. That's why you're the only group to center in on, like, we're the real deal with British invasion, because we're going back and giving you songs that are so great, pop hits, as I said, British type of music hall songs. But not only that, we're giving you serious songs. Like, I mean, your songs are so serious too that they come across the whole void. Like No Milk Today, Listen People, there's a kind of hush all over the world. These are signature songs that are only yours, that are so unique that they capture the whole world. And you know how to deliver a message through the song to the world. That is your secret, as far as I can analyze it.
The thing that's hard to explain is everything was done for fun. We didn't have any other motivation. The idea when we made a record was that we want this record. It was Mickey Most's idea. He was a bit of a genius because he could choose songs that he played after the 9 o'clock news. The biggest time to sell records was right after the news, because that was the only way you could get the news, remember, because whatever it was, the pound at a new low, bong, unemployment up to 5 million, bong. Herman'S Hermits woke up this morning feeling fine. How about that for a good idea? Or Sunshine Girl, or My Sentimental Friend Over There. Yeah. I mean, they were all... And when we went into the studio, 99% of the time we spent laughing, and 1% of the time we were making recording. If you listen to those records, you can tell we're all having fun. Sometimes we would record things like in a moment, and those moments managed to capture on tape. He sometimes wouldn't let us record again. He said, no. I said, well, I think I can do a better job. And he goes, I don't care. That's the take. And it happened with the Animals. The Animals didn't like the bass player mistake in House of the Rising Sun, and they wanted to record it again. And he says, I don't believe you can ever do it better than that. A mistake is fine. I don't believe there's something happening on the record. So, excuse me, I've combed my hair today, but I'm still lucky to have some. That was it, So the recording of I'm Henry VIII, it took as long to record as the record is. 1 minute and 57. It was done in one take. Mickey said, we've got this, let's do the I'm Henry VIII. I said, I don't really know it. And he goes, and then he said, and Leckenby came up with that guitar lick, which was a Chuck Berry. It's a complete steal from a Chuck Berry idea. Chuck. And Barry Whitwam, the drummer, came up with that. And we sang it for a laugh, really. We were all laughing when we made it, and you can hear it with the scream before the guitar solo. We thought it was like a Little Richard scream, it was supposed to be like, ow, but it comes out like, ow, like that. It's just, but we didn't re-record it. We said, that's it. It's a, And loads of them, just you can hear people laughing and talking on them. When you get back to the original takes and you listen to the playback, you go, oh my God, listen, that's completely out of tune, but it sounds fun.
I'm Henry the Eighth, I am. Henry the Eighth, I am. I got married to the widow next door. She's been married 7 times before, and everyone was an Henry. She wouldn't have a Willie nor a Sam. No Sam. I'm a right old man, I'm Henry. Henry the Eighth, I am.
What was it like the first time you met Paul McCartney and John Lennon? Was it more like they're older than you and they're trying to tell you about the business? Or they just respected that you were already in the charts and doing the business? What was that meeting like?
I saw the Beatles in Abbotsford Park in Urmston, near my grandmother's again. We walked, me and that guy called Albert Rigby. We crossed a couple of fields and we snuck in the Batsford, and the Beatles were playing there. We didn't know it was the Beatles. We just heard a band playing, that kind of thing in the neighborhood. We could hear a band playing. So we were in a band. So we walked to find out who this band was. And it was the Beatles, and they were just tuning up. But when they came on stage, the future was, we've seen there's a load of bands around here. And they're all, some are average, some are below average, some are better, some are better. The thing that I saw all of the Beatles was you could tell that they loved each other. And they were having fun playing those songs. They didn't write many songs. They only had a couple of songs in the show that they did Twist and Shout. And they were loving it. And you could see that they were loving singing these great American songs and looking at each other and were inspired by and laughing when they made something that didn't sound quite right. And then looking lovingly when somebody did a good lick that was more like the original record. And you could feel that sort of thing. And the great thing about the Hermits was that they were all good guys. They were really good guys. We didn't have any of those. We didn't have a drug addict. We didn't have a child molester. We didn't have anybody who was a bad guy. Lex Leckenby's dad was a police constable on a bike, riding around, keeping us out of trouble. And he was the kind of constable who wouldn't arrest you, he would beat you up. So we kind of knew that we were safe, because, we'd all been beaten up once and we didn't want another go. And, Keith Hopwood's dad was a telephone engineer and Carl Green's dad was an engraver in a business, like a Luddite engraver. And his mum served the school dinners at the school. And it was all kind of, I don't know much about Barry Whitman because we didn't know him. He just joined the band with Lec. And I don't know what his mum and dad did, but we all met in the group. We didn't go to school together. We all went to different schools. We all lived in different parts. We met because we had the same taste in music, basically. We wanted to be in a successful, happy rugby team. We often think of ourselves as like this rugby team because when we get on a plane, people would say, do you know the Beatles and everything? And we would sing and we would make fun of people because everybody seemed to be so much older than we were. Everybody, like the Beatles were 6 years older than us. Now that doesn't seem like much. But when you're 15 and somebody's 21, they're in a completely different league. There's the Premier League and you're with Accrington Stanley in the 4th division. And, they liked us because it's hard to explain, but none of these people were competitors. We didn't compete with the Beatles. The Beatles, everyone was totally unique and different, remember? We weren't like the Beatles, and the Beatles weren't like the Who, and the Who weren't like the Rolling Stones, and the Rolling Stones weren't like the Beatles, and the Beatles weren't like Herman'S Hermits, and Herman'S Hermits weren't like... So we were all given our little, off you go, son. Really, there was a really great atmosphere amongst the bands. And because England is so small, we didn't realize it was small then. We had a van, a Bedford Dormobile, top speed was 30 miles an hour. Everything took us 9 hours. You know what I mean? We would finish a concert at 11 o'clock in Birmingham and get dropped off at home. My grandmother's at 5 a.m. in the morning, So, but everybody knew each other. When I talk to people from then, people that I still know, people that are still alive, basically, they remember stopping at the Blue Boar on the A5 and Herman'S Hermits. I don't think we were even called Herman'S Hermits. We became famous because people wanted to beat us up in those days. You know, that not other bands, although we were pretty good at beating up other bands who tried to beat us up. My mother had a coffee table with like screwing legs about that long, and we'd made a plan. We were not hard boys, but we needed to protect ourselves because truck drivers would say, "Are you a boy or a girl?" And for some reason, that was like, "Oh, what are you?" If they could say you're one of the Beatles, fine, you know. But are you a boy or a girl? Meant like they wanted us to join in outside in the parking. So we unscrewed these. We only had four because we only had four. So the weedy guy in the band didn't get one. And I saw Jack Bruce, and Jack Bruce was in a band called Cream, but he was in a load of bands. He was in all the bands that would be going up and down one when we were. You'd see hundreds of bands. And our enemy was the truck driver, because for some reason they didn't like pop music. You know, maybe they liked Big Bill Broonzy. So we had them, and we used to put them up our sleeves. And Jack Bruce said, so we go in this place, and the guy, Jack Bruce, was in another band, and they're sitting at a table looking at us, and some truck drivers there. He says, and he sees me getting this thing out and saying, he says, what are you doing? What are you doing? I said, you know, you have to hit them first, because if you don't hit them first, they'll get it off you and hit you with it. We were 15-year-old boys, like fighting with men who didn't like the fact that we were popular with girls, probably. You know what I mean? There was a great scene, and the Beatles were part of that scene a minute before. The minute that they made it, I think it was Love Me Do, the whole scene, because they were now out of the picture. They were now with Cliff Richard in that other Netherland. You know, Elvis, Cliff, and the Beatles. They've all gone off. Now they've left this for us. This is all for us now. Second reason was really good, guys. The Hermits got in the band was because my band, whatever it was called at the time, had more work than any. I was my dad used to say entrepreneur, but I think I was just a hustler, really, because I figured if you played a lot more gigs, first of all, when you got a gig that somebody else didn't get, they envied you because so we did more gigs and we got better gear than other bands because, on my dad's credit, you know, it was called hire purchase, and you could easily sign his name, you know, and he probably knew, but he knew that he would always get the money paid in the bank. When we'd show up, and we always did a good job, and people liked us. They didn't necessarily like the music, but they liked them. This is before we made records. You know, Bob Wooler, who booked the Cavern, and then he liked us, so we would play the nighttime Cavern, still doing odd songs. You know, we would do My Boy Lollipop, which would not have been popular with the truck drivers, but it was the audience knew that was fun. That we didn't do Sherry, Sherry baby. We did My Boy Lollipop, pop, 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 because it was a good song. And we were doing odd songs, and that's where Mrs. Brown, You Got a Lovely Daughter came in, because we needed odd songs. Remember, nobody's competing with each other. So to have different songs than each other, because if you did Roll Over Beethoven, people would say, it's not as good as the Beatles do it. Found songs that no one else did. And luckily, when I met Mickey Most, I immediately knew that he knew exactly what I was talking about all the time. I went to his house, and him and his wife, I'd seen him at an Everly Brothers concert. He was on an Everly Brothers. It all goes a bit like this. So I went with my sister, who was 2 years older than me, Denise. She took me because she was in love with the Phil Everly, the Everlys. And my dad wouldn't let her go anywhere unless I went with her. Can you imagine a 13-year-old girl with a 14-year-old girl with a 12-year-old brother tagging along? And she was a pretty girl. So she made me go with her. And we went on the bus to Manchester. And as we left to go back to the bus stop, out the back door, there's a Shara, a bus parked at the back door. Door come the Everly Brothers and the Rolling Stones. They were on the show as well. And Bo Diddley out the back door. And we're not fans to buy it. We don't want autographs. But we see Phil and Don, they don't get on the bus. The Stones creep onto the bus. And the Everly Brothers stop and talk to who they think they're fans. And remember, it isn't about sex or anything at the time. Their fans are people who love the music. My sister is the only one who's in this crowd who would like to go home with Phil, or at least back to the hotel for a few hours. We're talking, and Mickey Mouse comes out. And during the show, we liked Mickey Mouse because he did rock and roll songs, and he had no strings on his guitar. And we knew that he had no strings on his guitar, but nobody in the audience did. And he kneeled down on the stage with a guitar solo on a string with no guitars. So we thought, that's fantastic. How cool is that? He's got no guitars, but he's still in the audience, like miming a guitar solo. Brilliant, like real rock and roll, you know what I mean? So, and doing that Chuck Berry duck walk and all, brilliant. And he comes out and he doesn't get on the bus. He walks with his girlfriend at the time, Chris, and he opens the hood of the car, the bonnet of the car, and puts guitar in it. And we go, what is that all about? He's put his guitar in the end because we don't know it's a Porsche. We've never seen a Porsche before. He has a Porsche already. And he opens the door for us, and we thought, the man is already a star. Look at that. He's the opening act on the show, but he's got a Porsche and everyone else is on the bus. Right, so we go, wow, he's cool. So eventually my manager makes a meeting with him. We want him to be our producer. He's made a couple of records with the Nashville Teens and the Animals. And I go to us in Wembley, his mum and dad, his mother-in-law and father-in-law's house. He's not got a house of his own yet. He's still, he's just come back from South Africa, where he's had a career. I go to his house and I say, I saw you at the Everly Brothers show. And he picks up him and his wife sing to me, Devoted to You by the Everly Brothers. And is the most romantic, incredible in my whole life. I mean, I'm only 15. So you've only heard, you've got Bebop-A-Lula is the closest thing you've got to something. So, and he goes, I'll never hurt you, I'll never lie, I'll never be untrue, I'll never give you, and he believes it. And his wife believes it, and they're singing to each other. And I go, well, that's it. That's the music. That's the music that I want to be in, where you have a song and you believe it. No more My Boy Lollipop for me. I got to get songs that I believe it. And so we eventually get to the studio, and Mickey says during this thing, I don't know if anybody knew this, but there's this book called Stanislavski Method, where you have to believe you become the character in the songs. I'd been in an acting class, which I hated, because I didn't like actors. So I knew about this Stanislavski method, and I thought, I wonder if I could do that. When I do like a Bobby Rydell song, I'll Never Dance Again, My Soul Was a Swain. Do you think I could get myself into the ballroom and see the girl and record it? And that's it. Herman'S Hermits made recordings of real things. So, they'll last forever. They can put them in a time capsule and they go, so listen, these lads, they were just teenagers and they made a record, and you can tell that they believe it. And Mickey Most would say sometimes, I'd do we'd run through from Mrs. Brownie Got a Lovely Daughter. He didn't want to record Mrs. Brownie Got a Lovely Daughter. He thought it was a lousy idea. But we'd run out of stuff to record. We couldn't do Roll Over Beethoven, and we had to do an LP, and it needed 12 tracks. And he said, okay, we'll do it, and we'll put it on side 2, track 3, and we'll never get that far into your LP. Always kind of Scorpio kind of sting at every compliment, which I liked. He would say during this, I don't believe you. When you see Mrs. Brownie Got a Lovely Daughter, you kind of going for I called it the Cliff Richard thing, singing it as beautifully as you possibly could. He'd been negative about that. No, I don't believe you when you sing it sing it as if it's you in the song. Okay, I was really good at being me in songs. I didn't have to rehearse that at all.
Mrs. Brown, you've got a lovely daughter. Girls as sharp as her are something rare. But it's sad, she doesn't love me now. She's made it clear enough.
those things are magical moments in music for me that got recorded. Loads of people have their best performance in a live concert and nobody recorded it, because you remember it used to be banned before Facebook and stuff like that. You couldn't, oh no, people will steal it. We were just having, you mean you want a copy of this? Take it. You want people to own your music. Nobody figured that out. All these newcomers don't understand that we got all our music made by you. But when I was a kid, all the music I got was free. You would go into the Wimpy Bar in Manchester and everybody had a jukebox on their table and everybody played the music. And they didn't round after the first 15 songs. Say, okay, you owe us 1 6 because you've been listening to songs that I paid for. No, they were free. And on the radio, it was free. And you had to buy a license. Your mom and dad bought a license and everybody got their music for free. And they were, in retrospect, it was good music. They played good music. We didn't miss anything, We didn't miss any part of the music business because we didn't know who was a country singer, who was a blues singer. We just didn't know. Didn't play much rhythm and blues on the BBC, but that's because it was popular.
When you go from music and then you're in the movies, I mean, you're a movie star now at a young age. I mean, you're outselling the Beatles as well, and you're the biggest thing in the world. What was that like?
Well, everybody in England were in the shadow of the Beatles, and it was a big shadow, and it was a long, wide, fat shadow, because everything they did was brilliant. Remember, they came out and they were funny. They were all great comedians. They were great songwriters. They were kind of great at everything. And people would ask me, do you want to do this movie? And I would say, have the Beatles done one? And they say, oh, yeah, okay. And I found out years later that the Beatles would ask that same question. They'd say, Brian would say, you want to do a movie? And they would say, has Elvis done one? Their shadow was Elvis Presley. There was nobody bigger in the world than Elvis Presley at the time, remember? In England, we had Cliff Richards, who was a close second. And, every English person's life includes Cliff Richards, Summer Holiday, The Young Ones. We all know all his songs. So, but the shadow from Herman'S Hermits was the Beatles. And we were sort of following in their footsteps to the point that we would arrive at Dallas Airport. And the plane would land, and there were so many girls in the terminal that they would take us to a side terminal and unload us with police on motorbikes and black cars, as if we were presidential. And the people on the plane, like all 50-plus businessmen, hated us. You think you're the Beatles or something? So we didn't plan this. We didn't plan any of this, but that male envy thing was massive at the time. And I'm a quiet little kid. People think that I grew into me. It took me a long time. I think I became myself in 1986 or 1987. Do you know what I mean? So I'd been around for 40 years before I knew who I was, really. I was always running around. I never stopped working. I tried to tell you before that when people joined my band, they didn't join the band for any other reason than we had more work than everybody else. Keith Hopwood says, I was in a band called the Balmains. We were doing really well, but you had so much more work than us. I decided to join you. So at the time, I didn't know that was one of the reasons, because I was always I never stopped working. You say I did all this stuff. And that's part of my story, that I was always that I didn't have time to really think about it. So, people try to do a movie about a documentary, really, about the beginning and and so that we get all this, the band's 8mm, no sound things. Everybody had a video camera and we were shooting all this stuff. And the man who's putting this together says, well, you're not in any of the scenes. There's all these great scenes at the motel jumping into swimming and I didn't say it. One of the hermits said, well, he was never there for that. He was always off doing the promotion. Okay, that's what was happening. You guys were all at the swimming pool getting a suntan, jumping around in the thing, and I was being picked up at 6 a.m. by the production department and going in a station wagon to every radio station and the Merv Griffin show and the Mike Douglas show and every TV show in town, while you were sitting at the hotel wondering, what else can we do today? I was a busy kid. So you don't have time for anything, to tell you the truth. I just was busy, and it was full on from 1962, full on. I mean, I was at school, and I wasn't doing really well at school, but I could manage it. I could manage it, but the band would pick me up near the school gates. I had my clothes for school in the garage, and I would switch clothes. You can't show up at gig in a school uniform, and the cap, the cap, and the satchel. Exactly. And early gigs, early on when we first started, me and Carl Green would go to gigs on our bikes, and he had his mum's bike with a basket on the front, and he would put his guitar in it. And the only thing we thought of was we don't want any girls to see us.
I know in 1966, you came here to Melbourne for the Hilton show, right? That was at the Melbourne Hilton place. What an experience that is. It's one of the greatest 24-minute videos on YouTube. I want everyone to go and see it. What was it like coming to Melbourne at that particular time, early 1966?
It was fantastic. We loved Australia because everybody knew the music, and they'd been exposed to all the same music as we had. It was like a shock. I have friends with Tom Jones, and he was around at the time. We were on a tour together at the time. He can remember the dates and places that we played, and the fight we got in at St Kilda with some guys who threatened Tom Jones, and just the whole thing was a blast. You couldn't have a better experience to be this kid, 17 years old, I think I was, maybe 18, arriving in Australia and having all those beautiful girls and men with like zinc on their nose to fight with. And it was just a magical experience, and of course, everybody knew the music. See, there's a point we would go to other countries, and they didn't really know the music, so they would only be responding to. I mean, we did Traveling Light. We were in Australia. We put in the show Traveling Light, which was a Cliff Richard song, and everybody went nuts because it was great. So it was just, all English people love Australia. They all want to go there.
Now, I just want to explain. Yourself and Davy Jones played in Coronation Street. Now, as I said, you came to Melbourne in early 66, but late 66, the Monkees are on TV. Did you think, hey, they're imitating me? They got Davy Jones, and he's British. He's like me. They're doing what I do. What did you think when you first saw the Monkees?
So I was invited by the man who was creating the Monkees, Bert Shoveloff or something like
that.
Yeah,
that's right, Bert Snyder.
What is it? Okay, so, and I go in the Hollywood Hills, and I'm too young to drive. And I go in this room, and in this room, sitting at a table is Bobby Darin. Amazing. Bobby, I always wanted to meet Bobby Darin. I sing like we're going to make, when I meet people that are famous, I always sing a bit of their songs to them. It's called Selective Onset Tourette Syndrome. And they tell me they've got this idea for a TV show, and they play me the track. Yeah, let's try to Clarksville with the two boys who wrote it singing. Boys,
Bobby, Boyce and Hart.
Yeah, they're singing it. That sounds like a number one to me. And they say, yeah, in the band we got this English kid who's going to be like, he's like the Herman, and we've got this John Lennon character, and then we got and they go through this thing. I said, well, what's it called? What's it called? They go, the Monkees. I said, they'll never make it with a name like that. That's a stupid name. And I didn't know Davy Jones. We were both from Manchester. We'd both been on Coronation Street. Ina Sharple's grandson, and I played Len Fairclough, who was the star of the show. I played his son. And, the Monkees was just this thing. This is a strange thing. The Monkees came along. We heard their records on the radio every 50 minutes. And they came to England. They made it. We'd never seen the TV show. None of the Hermits ever saw the TV show because we were always on the road. It was on at a time when we just didn't see it. So they show up in England, and they're doing Top of the Pops. And the Beatles are on Top of the Pops in another room. We're all in a different room. I think Beatles are doing, I can't remember the song anyway. So me and a couple of the Beatles go to look at the Monkees. To look at them, let's have a look. Someone says, hey, let's have a look at them. There's all these girls screaming. And we admire the fact that they've been taking over they're taking over that business from us, because all of us want to go into the next phase where it isn't teenage girls. It's like the whole family shows up, like Cliff Richard and like the Beatles, like all the people before. So we go in there and stand up, and Mickey Dolenz and Davy Jones are completely, they're adorable pop stars. They take time away from whatever they're doing and they come and they're so pleased to meet the Beatles. And I get this, hello, I get one of those, you know, from Davey. Oh, yeah. And then they take a picture and they cut me out of the picture.
Thank you so much, Peter Noone, for being on the show, man. The world loves you.
Hey, let's do it again. I enjoyed myself.
We'd like to do this one called Listen, People. Listen, people, to what I say. I say everybody's got to have their day. And don't you know, everybody's got to love somebody sometime. Everybody's got to win a hole. Everybody's got to lose somebody sometime. So take care that you don't lose your heart. I once found love just like you. But then he came, he might come to you. And don't you know that everybody's got to lose somebody sometimes, but everybody can hold. Everybody's got to lose somebody sometimes, so take care that you don't lose your heart. Take my advice, always whine, that you'll be happy all of the time. Take my advice and you will see that you'll be happy as you can be. Listen, people, to what I say. I say everybody's got to have their day. And don't you know that everybody's got to love somebody sometime, but everybody can hold. Everybody's got to love somebody sometime, so take care that you don't lose your heart. Don't lose your heart. Listen, people. Listen, people.